and welcome. My name is Diana Durham. I'm a writer and a poet, and a lot of my work has focused on the myths of King Arthur and the Grail quest and what they mean in our lives. And I'm going to be exploring that meaning in a series of videos. Now, the myths of King Arthur and the Grail quest deal with really titanic themes. On the one hand, there's the great King Arthur, who draws the sword from the stone, who presides over the Knights of the Round Table, and who has the wizard Merlin as his advisor. And of course, this king is not a psychopath. He does not seek total control over his people, but he's wise, he unites his kingdom, and he's up for listening to what other people have to say, which is, of course, what that round table signifies. And on the other hand, there is the wounded king, who is also known as the wounded fisher king. And later on in this series, I'll explain why he also has that epithet, what it means. But the wounded king who rules over a wasteland, the cattle cannot reproduce, the crops fail, and the land is ravaged by war and conflict. And between these two figures of King Arthur and the wounded king, the good king and the king you don't really want to have, runs the story of the Grail quest. The word Grail comes from an old French word, Graal, that means kind of open bowl, a dish-like bowl. So whether it's a cup, a chalice, the Grail, it's all meaning the same object. And there is the haunting promise over this quest for the Grail, which is that if you find the Grail, whoever finds the Grail can heal the wounded king, and if you heal the wounded king, you can restore his wasteland kingdom. So where did these myths come from? How did they emerge? Threads and versions of these legends originated in the oral traditions of storytelling, possibly from as early as the 7th century. There'd be tales told around fires at night, sung by troubadours in the halls of lords and the courts of kings. And then from the 12th century to the 15th century, different versions of these stories were written down. And there was an outpouring of pseudo-histories, romances, and Grail texts, and some of the best known of which are Chrétien de Troyes' poem Percival, Malory's Morte d'Arthur, and also Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain. Now, much later on in Victorian England, the poet laureate Tennyson wrote a long poem with the same name as Malory's work, Morte d'Arthur. And ever since then, the stories have been told and retold in many ways. T.H. White's Once and Future King. There are many children's editions of Malory's stories, a Disney's cartoon, Sword in the Stone. Dan Brown's best-selling Da Vinci Code draws on elements in the Grail myth. And more recently, the BBC ran a series called Merlin. Now, the fact that we are still retelling and reworking these stories is significant because it shows that, as myths go, the Arthurian and Grail legends are modern. Unlike the Egyptian or Greek or the Genesis creation myths, which go way back into the mists of time, the stories of Arthur and the Grail, these stories, they really began to form in the West imagination only about 1400 years ago. And that is part of the reason why they resonate so strongly still in our imaginations, because they speak to us about our lives in the present era. The story of Arthur begins with Merlin. Merlin is no ordinary mortal. He is a magician who can work enchantment and see into the future. And so the myth begins with magic. Merlin seeks to bring about a new era in the battle-torn land of Britain. He knows that somehow this raggle-taggle collection of warring fiefdoms has got to be transformed into a great kingdom, because he can foresee that this kingdom will in turn produce something that is vital to the destiny of mankind. But even though Merlin has magical powers, he cannot bring about this new era on his own. He has to work through ordinary mortals. And when we first meet him in the tales, Merlin is faced with the problem of the current king Uther Pendragon. Uther is a hard-working battle horse who's won many battles and holds together a fragile alliance. But unfortunately, he is also rough-mannered, aggressive, and ruled by his passions. And Merlin knows only too well that Uther will never have what it takes to unite the kingdom. Uther has arranged for a reconciliatory meeting with one of his greatest enemies, who is Gorlois, Duke of Cornwall. And he invites Gorlois and his wife Igraine to visit with him. However, unfortunately, Uther falls in love with the beautiful Igraine, wife of Gorlois. And this leads, of course, to further enmities between the two camps. And while Igraine is kept locked up in the castle of Tintagel on the north coast, the wild north coast of Cornwall, Gorlois takes up in another castle where Uther and his men besiege him. Now, Uther is fainting from sheer anger and frustration and desire when he asks for Merlin's help. And seeing through into the future, Merlin, instead of trying to dissuade Uther, makes a deal with him. He will change Uther into the likeness of Gorlois and allow him to enter the castle that night and sleep with Igraine. But the condition is that Uther will hand over to Merlin's keeping the baby that will be conceived that night through their union. All goes as planned, but Gorlois is slain in battle some hours before Uther's visit. And so later on, Igraine realizes it wasn't her husband she slept with that night. Eventually, Uther marries Igraine anyway, but the deal has been done. And when the baby boy, Arthur, is born, he is duly handed over to Merlin. Merlin places the baby Arthur in the care of a trusted knight, Sir Hector, who lives in a remote part of the kingdom, and Arthur is to be brought up as Sir Hector's own son. Merlin and his magical realm represent the mysterious workings of the subconscious mind. He resides in those unfathomable layers of wisdom where exist the powers that regulate our heartbeat or cause the living child to form in the womb, and sometimes which cause us to see events before they happen. Merlin can do things which ordinary mortals cannot. The subconscious mind has powers which our conscious mind does not. I remember my own experience when I was pregnant with my first child, resting one day and thinking, I have no idea how this is happening. I'm lying here doing nothing, and a child, a little baby, is forming inside me. Nevertheless, the subconscious mind needs the cooperation of the conscious mind. And in these tales, Merlin needs the cooperation of ordinary mortals in order to fulfill his mission. Interestingly then, Merlin also represents the realm out of which the myth itself has emerged. Our collective subconscious or memory. For just as individually we have vivid dreams that can tell us something about our waking lives, so as cultures and as nations we generate myths which are like collective dreams and which tell us something about our whole society and whole culture. And again, just as is the case in our personal dreams, every character, place and significant object in the myth or in the collective dream is symbolic and has to be interpreted to yield its meaning. So what does magic itself symbolize? I've already said Merlin represents a subconscious power, and just as Merlin is closely aligned with magic and foresight, so our subconscious is aligned with deeper forces such as intuition and nature herself. We know we cannot utter magic words and transform someone into the appearance of another, but through the workings of our consciousness, we do have the power to create. And later in this series, I'll look more closely at what that means. But to give an example of what magic might symbolize in terms of nature, I want to reference briefly the work of biologist Michael Denton, who in his book Nature's Destiny explores how the laws of biology reveal purpose in the universe. Denton documents how everything from the quantity and diffusion of supernovae in space to the qualities of water, light, the elements, carbon, the vital gases, the metals on planet Earth, along with the human cell and DNA's double helix, work perfectly and exactly together to produce nature and human life in all their differentiations. Here's a quote from his book. As the eerie illumination of science penetrates ever more deeply into the order of nature, the cosmos appears increasingly to be a vast system finely tuned to generate life. All the evidence available in the biological sciences supports the core proposition that the cosmos is a specially designed whole with life and mankind as its fundamental goal and purpose, a whole in which all facets of reality, from the size of galaxies to the thermal capacity of water, have their meaning and explanation in this central fact. That is a great magic indeed.